my property to get a security fence, and I've been like just really trying to get those things to grow. So this spring, I'm looking forward to it. But today is a good day for a second reason because we got Gino Barbaro with us on the podcast. If you guys have been listening to me for a while, he's been on here a few times. He has so much good stuff to go into. Super successful investor. They invest out of Nashville, I believe, right? Oh, no, Knoxville.
Nice.
Out there in Tennessee, and now he's with Gino or Barbaro 360. A lot to go into with Gino. He's very, very wise when it comes to real estate. So, Gino, thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Gabe, thanks for having me. And I am always partial. Every time I see the word Gabe Petersen, the name, it brings a smile to my face because my firstborn daughter, I've got 6 kids, is named Gabriella. So
Nice.
dude, I love the name. It crushes.
It's solid. There actually aren't a lot of Gabes out there. It's
There
a
are not.
little bit of a rare name, but it's a good one.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Gino, I told you before we're getting on here, and you know how this show goes. We always like to start with stories to hear how people got to where they are. I love your story. You've told it a few times, but let's rehash. Let's get back to the beginning. Tell people how you got started and how you got to where you are today.
Well, the beginning is pretty interesting for me. I was, son of 2 immigrants. I have to start out with that because that led me to go to college. My parents sort of forced me to go to college because they didn't have the opportunity. So I went to college, got a corporate job for a year. I hated it. My dad owned the restaurant, so I ended up going into the restaurant business at the age of 23. I loved it for about 15 years. Then the Great Recession of '08 comes along and things drastically change. Working harder, making less. At that point, I had done a couple of real estate deals that did not work out. Fortunately for me, they didn't work out because I had to become serious. I had to learn the business of real estate. I went out and I took a couple of mentorship programs. I was fortunate in the restaurant business to be able to meet my business partner, Jake Stenziano, who was a pharmaceutical rep. He was coming to the restaurant, taking orders and bringing them to doctors' offices and selling them legal drugs. And he loved his job until the Sunshine Act came in 2009. This seems like it was like a millennia ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So you have a pizza guy and a drug rep. They both hate their jobs. They're both saying to themselves, and they're both grumpy, miserable pricks at the time because, like, we hate New York. Everything's expensive here. We hate our jobs. We don't see a future here. What do we do? So the two of us get together. And in 2011, we start looking at real estate down in Knoxville, Tennessee, of all places. I'm a New Yorker. I had never heard of Knoxville, Tennessee back in 2011. Jake moved down there. So I'm like, okay, let's look. I mean, deals look really good down here. You can actually cash flow down here. It took us 18 months to find that first deal, Gabe. But after that first deal, things started to accelerate for us. We've met the right brokers. We started doing the right deals. And within 5 years, we were at almost 800 units. So if you put it into context, I had one restaurant over the course of my career for over 20 years. And within 5 years, Jake and I had a little over 800 units. It was actually really interesting. And I'm sure you're going to touch upon that. But for me, a lot of that mindset coming along, a lot of getting into a different business, a lot of getting into a real estate business that I knew wasn't just buying assets. I realized, wow, real estate and multifamily are scalable businesses. So that's how Jake and I started. And to this date, to date, we've transacted on over probably 2,400 units. We currently own 1,900 units in the portfolio. We do not have any syndications. It's all our own capital. We've sort of positioned ourselves that way. And we have a vertically integrated company. So we manage our own assets.
Nice, man. Yeah. And I love what people I feel like don't realize when they first get into real estate is how quickly you can. I mean, 800 is beyond financial freedom, but
Yeah.
how quickly you can get to that point, because that's when they first get started. That is the goal that everybody has in mind. They want to get financial freedom. They want their cash flow to exceed their monthly expenses. And that can actually happen a lot quicker than you think. It's not that many units that you need to buy in order to get to that point. But to your point, you were working in your business, in your pizzeria for 15 years. And I'm sure you couldn't have left that business without it cratering at some point. But you were able to get to a point where your family was relatively free within, I mean, you said 5 years, but I'm sure it was previous to that where you realized that your expenses were covered.
It's interesting because when I started in 2011, it was the depths of the recession. And it's very similar to what's going on right now. Debt was hard to get. there weren't a lot of deals out there, but nobody was financing these deals. The economy at that time was terrible. I'm not really sure where the economy is now. I mean, GDP, is that a function of what's going on with AI? I just don't understand where we are with the economy. It just does. It feels uncertain. So back then, there were a lot of deals, but nobody was financing these deals. And Jake and I, it did take us 18 months. We actually had a broker named Rick who, liked us for some reason. We're New Yorkers. We're in Tennessee, we're Stenziano, and we're Barbaro. We heard a lot of y'all ain't doing business down here. And Jake was this young, I don't want to say egotistical, but a little brash. He didn't understand that the relationship building in real estate and getting brokers to like you and to trust you was of vital importance for us. And that's what actually turned the table. Rick liked us. He brought us a couple of deals. Even on that very first deal, we used seller financing on that first deal. And that was the crazy part. Like, I mean, I had all these beliefs around money. And on the very first deal, it's like, holy crap, 10% of the money that we need is being financed from the seller. And the irony of that is we just paid off that note back in 2013. We took a $60,000 seller finance note back in 2013. Brenda last month said, I think it's about time you want to settle up on it. The note was $32,000. We paid her off after 13 years of paying $329 a month. It's an incredible business. And to what you said, you can make money in real estate in so many different fashions. But if you're getting into it in the beginning, the goal for you, especially if you have a little capital, is to try to create as much equity as possible. And that's what Jake and I did. We did cash flow on these assets, but what really got us to become financially free was the ability to create value with the assets, increase NOI, increase value, and exit the asset through the refinance. A lot of operators would sell and move on to the next one. We just loved the deals that we were in. They were at a good basis. We added so much value. Why kill the golden goose? We like the market we were in. Let's hold these things. Let's refinance the money. And as I'm working at my restaurant making pizzas, that's paying for my lifestyle, right? And the money from the real estate over here, everything that I made with Jake, all the cash flow, all the refinances was going back into the real estate. That's why it did take me some time. It took me 5 years from when I started looking with Jake to be able to exit the restaurant business. And I think that's what people should understand. You don't have to burn the bridges and go all in tomorrow to live your dreams. What you
And that's
have to
actually
do, yeah, but what you really have to do is you have to burn them mentally and make the decision, hey, I need to do this, but let me hold off because I don't want to burn all the capital I'm creating in this real estate business to be able to pay for my lifestyle. Let my lifestyle suffer a little bit. Let me work a little bit harder here to be able to get to this point. And then there will be a point when you've got equity coming in, sales of properties, refinances, exits, and then all of a sudden they're creating so much equity here that you can leave that job ultimately.
That's actually something that I wish I had done when I first got started on the commercial side in
Hmm.
2019. So I burned the bridges. Like I quit my job. I was like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not looking back. It did work out for me, but I had wished that I had done real estate on the side while keeping a W-2 because
Hmm.
that the money coming in is actually beneficial, especially what I was doing off market. And so it helps with
Yes.
the marketing budget, all that stuff. And so I wish, I mean, if I wanted to stay in real estate, I wish I would have like even got a job in lending or whatever,
There's no wrong way though. I think you did the right thing. Looking back, going, I wish I had done this, but that was right for you at that moment in time. It felt good in your bones. I had no other choice, Gabe. I had 5 kids at the time. I'm living in New York. It's expensive. I just can't pick up and go, I'm done. Because then what happens is I don't want to be set in a situation where I have to sell an asset or I have to all of a sudden downsize. And I didn't want to do that. So I was willing to work 70, 80 hours a week for a good 12, 18 months there. I was willing to sacrifice that. And Gabe, this is another thing, because I know you wanted to talk about family, but this is truly what launched me into this idea. I came home from the restaurant one day at nighttime. I had my long johns on because it was 20 degrees outside. I smelled like garlic, and I saw my wife in the laundry room. And I said to her, I said, Julia, I can't take this anymore. I need to get out of this business. This is killing me. I'm not making enough money. There's no future here. I hate New York. I hate the taxes here. How about I quit the restaurant and we move to Florida? And she looked puzzled. And about 3 seconds later, she said, Yeah, let's do it. And I was shocked. And I was actually afraid for a few seconds because I didn't think she was going to say yes so quickly. But what that allowed me to do was I'm a male, I'm a man. I derive respect and I derive love and I derive significance by being able to provide for my family and by being able to provide for my wife. And when she said yes, she gave me permission. But with that yes came a shit ton, sorry for cursing, of responsibility and a shit ton of fear. And I'm like, if she's giving me permission to risk everything, I need to go to work. I need to really put in the effort. I need to put in the time. I need to put in the dedication to be able to make this a success. So I don't want to hear that, oh, it's lunchtime. I need to take a break. Or I get home from the restaurant at 10 o'clock at night and it's too late to underwrite deals. No, she said yes. So I have to, I actually have to have my end of the bargain. And we call it two things actually. We call it radical accountability and relentless execution. I'm getting a little emotional here because I remember that conversation. It was actually scary. So I don't want to let her down. So for any of you trying to make this decision, really lock it in. And if you need to blame somebody or you need to like not let somebody down, because I was more willing to let myself down than I was my family. And I think that's what really sparked it. That was really the motivator for me. I'm like, I don't want to let them down. She's given me permission. I'm complaining here. Stop complaining. You've got an opportunity to do something about it. Let's go for it.
Nice. And I want to take that opportunity to kind of pivot into like what you'd said. You know, you've been on the show a few times. We've talked a lot about the successes that you've had, about the ups, the downs, but we haven't really broached a ton on. You had 5 kids at the time. You were building this business while you were growing a family. You know, I told you before we got on, I'm kind of in the same boat. I don't have 5 kids, but I have one 2.5-year-old, and then we have one coming
All
due here
right.
in March. And so I'm going through these kind of mental, thought processes
Yes.
of how to balance both growing a business and being a present father, being a present husband. Really taking both roles on and doing a good job in both roles as the entrepreneur, as the owner of the company and the family person. So dive into that. How did you do it, and what lessons did you learn looking back, that you feel like a younger, not younger, but somebody who's in a different position could apply to their own life?
Gabe, I was fortunate because I have an incredible wife. She can be annoying, but she's married to me and I'm a lot more annoying than she is. But the
Absolutely.
reality is that we had communication issues like every other couple. But when she saw me struggling there, when she saw the pain that I was in, I think she felt sort of sad, sort of empathy for me. And then we started the communication. And I said to her, Julia, I don't want to become an entrepreneur, to become financially free and to become rich. And I wanted to become financially free. And she didn't understand that. So the first step to do this with the family is to really map out why you're doing this. And I've heard so many people say, I'm doing this for my family. Have you ever asked your family if that's what they want? Or are you doing it unconsciously for yourself? There's nothing wrong with that. I was conditioned early on as a saver, as someone who's responsible, someone to take care of the family. But I ultimately just didn't want to worry about paying the bills, about going to the dentist office, about going on vacation. And once I conveyed that picture to my wife and said, Julia, I just want to become financially free. Every time you ask me for braces, there's another $5,000 that I could use to save for a kid's college. That's what I'm really trying to work towards. I'm not trying to work towards a Lamborghini, or I'm not trying to work towards these toys. I just want to become financially independent. Once I was able to paint that picture to her, it made sense to her and we got on the same page. And I was fortunate because at the restaurant, the kids came to work. So they were always around me at work. Bring the work home. Start the conversation about money with your spouse and don't be afraid to talk about money with your kids. Because believe it or not, 150, 200 years ago, there were no schools. We taught our children. We taught them everything they needed to know. So you are more than capable about teaching your kids how to read, how to go to the bathroom, how to talk about money, all of these topics. You're the parent, and especially if you're the father listening to this, you're the head of the household spiritually, and I think as a leader as well. So you have to take the mantle and you have to focus on that. And then from there, Gabe, talking about at your age And at any age, we talk about legacy as if it's something that we leave when we're not here anymore. Well, I want to flip it on its head and say it's something that you activate while you're here. Like from now on, you've had this conversation. The word legacy from now on is going to mean something different to you. You're building a legacy right now, not to leave it, but to actually teach the kids and involve the kids. And if you're an entrepreneur and your world is all about money and your world is all about mindset, you need first and foremost to get on the page with your wife. And my wife does not care about money, but now she knows where the money is. We have these conversations, we make these decisions together, and now we're involving our children in these decisions by building a business and by learning all these tools, because ultimately as a parent, your goal is to raise kids who are responsible and who can ultimately make decisions for themselves. And if you never talk about money, how are they going to be able to make decisions about money if they're never taught in the household, or there's never even a conversation about money in the household?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you said that because when I was when I grew up, money wasn't really talked about, and that meant that when I got to the point where I got a job and now it was my responsibility to make money, I kind of freaked out. Like I didn't really have a context or a
Yes.
framework to understand that you can make your own money. That it's not
Mhm.
you're not. To me, it felt almost like somebody controlled my life because I had to make money, versus
Uh,
something that I can go out there and do, and it's something that I'm giving and something that I can create myself. So that really is, I don't know, that kind of stood out to me. The other thing that you were saying, get on the same page with your wife, and that's something, at least for me, it is. It's a lot for myself is I don't really communicate what I'm thinking out loud. I feel like I am, but most of the time I'm not actually saying the words. And so that is something that I've personally realized recently is like you actually have to things that you feel like are being communicated, at least as a guy, because a lot of times I feel like as guys um we feel like things are being communicated, but they're not because we're not just continuously saying the words. And so getting into that habit is super important.
Gabe, let me share a resource that I think will be valuable for you, and I think for men and women on the show. We just interviewed a gentleman named Dr. John Gray. He wrote the book Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus.
Oh yeah.
Buy the book, and then you'll understand what you're talking about. Men are different than women in many aspects, as far as testosterone, as far as estrogen. What you're talking about is a man will retreat into his cave and will think about things. We need to calm things down, whereas women are more emotional and tend to verbalize a lot differently. We are two different creatures. We've been created differently, and we're not the same. And that's part of the communication problem that I had with my wife. I would retreat. I wouldn't say anything. She'd think something is wrong, and then we'd have an argument. And or she would come to me and start talking to me, and I would go into solve mode. Instead, all she wanted was for me to listen to her. These are things we're not taught. And Dr. John Gray's book is incredible in the way he lays it out. And for me, what you can do with your wife, because my wife and I, we grew up completely different as far as money. My wife came from a single mom, three kids, week to week, blue collar, people who have money. They're a little evil, they're a little greedy. And I grew up from a household that was more entrepreneurial, that actually
Mm.
had goals. So when we got married, my wife is like, goals? She actually left her tribe and joined my tribe. And unconsciously, that's very scary. Years ago, if you left your tribe, you're dead, you're ostracized. And then all of a sudden, if you start having some success, you feel ashamed or embarrassed because all of a sudden you're doing well here and your family is not doing well. And they're like, well, this rich person. And there was a lot of tension over the years. So, what I would say to anybody listening to this, if you have that situation, just sit down with your wife and ask and be curious. What did you hear when you were growing up about money? My wife, they had no idea it was week to week. They didn't really think about it. And they made good money. Back in the 80s, 90s, they were waitresses. They were making $1,000 a week in cash, but it seemed as if they never had any money left over. So when I'm telling my wife we've got this money in the bank, she's saying to herself, well, we got plenty of money. And it's just like the
Mm,
conversation when the argument was always about money, but it's
yeah.
not about money. So have that conversation with your spouse, ask them where they came from, and then start telling them about your fears, your anxieties, what you heard, what you didn't hear. And then all of a sudden you start having empathy with the person. And then hopefully you can start having some kind of what we call financial intimacy with the person. And once you can be intimate with your partner, all of a sudden you become more transparent and more authentic. And then you can start to connect with the person. And then all of a sudden you're not fighting, because fighting is pitting one against the other, but you're arguing. And having an argument is healthy because you don't want to hold anything back. You want to be able to talk to the person and communicate with the person. And always remember, you're on the same side. That's what I think most couples may forget. It's not me against you, it's us. And how do we solve it? But getting down to the root of it is actually finding out how you grew up around it and what your thoughts were and seeing how you can reconcile those.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You were mentioning like your wife would see money in the bank. She'll be like, "Yeah, we have money," and that I've had similar conversations because it's when I could see $100,000 in the bank, and I'll be like, that's not a lot of money because I don't think of money
Mhm.
that as money we can use. I think of that as what how can we turn that into cash flow, and cash flow is
Yes.
the only thing we can use, and
Mhm.
so some one person can see plenty of money and the other person can see something, not enough money. And
And you have to ask
it's
her why is it that that's a lot of money to you? Or more importantly, once I told my wife that, Julia, we're saving this money to buy an asset, to pay for an event. And once that event is over, we still own that asset. And real simple. We bought our very first property, me and Jake, in 2013. I bought that asset to be able to pay for my kids' college. Once my first two kids went to college, the event was over, but I still own the asset. And guess what? That asset to this day is still producing between $2,000 and $3,000 a month for myself personally. So once I can shift her mindset around it and say, hey, it's not about the money, right? It's about buying for us, for our family, these assets that can produce cash flow. Once you start painting the picture to them, then it's like, oh, and then I hear a little bit of fear in your background as far as $100,000. It's in the bank. I need it. I don't want it to go. We all have that. There's a lot of us in this world have fear, have shame. We as men are conditioned that we should know about money. And when we don't, that's a scary thing for us. I mean, like when we don't know, when we're unsure and we feel like we're failures, that is really weighs heavily on us as men. And when we're not taught about money and we're supposed to figure out about it, then all of a sudden you can see why we have these conversations and these arguments with our spouse.
yeah. Dang. So we have run down the clock. It's already past the 20-minute mark, but I wanted to ask one last question
Wow.
before we moved on. And it was about how to involve your kids. So my kids, 2.5,
Mm.
0, not born yet. When they're getting older, I want them to be excited about real estate. I want to get them involved. You've been through this process. How did you do it with your kids?
You need to be excited about real estate in order to see them. You need to mirror it. This is exactly why I wanted to get out of the restaurant business. I would come home as a grumpy prick. I didn't want my kids to see me as a grumpy prick because then they'd equate working hard, as being unhappy. That was my biggest fear, honestly. And I didn't want that to happen. I lost the joy of my job. I really did. And for me, once I got into the real estate space and I created Jake and Gino, the kids saw how much I loved it. The kids became a part of it naturally. They became part of the conversation. And then all of a sudden I said, hey, you guys have a little bit of money set aside. Do you want to start investing in my deals? And then all of a sudden they start investing in the deals. And now the conversations start changing. Now, this is as they get older, right? As they get older, all of a sudden it's not, hey, can I spend $1,000 to buy something? Hey, when's your next deal coming up? Dad, why didn't the owner draws pan out this month? What happened? Economic occupancy versus physical occupancy. Oh, these conversations you start to have. But when they're early and when it's younger, just make it simple, make it fun. If they get a gift, and you have money, use cash. Get your jar system where you can have save, spend, and charity. Allow them to be the part of the conversation. Allow them to use their own money and to make their own decisions. Because as they get older, they won't be afraid of making those decisions. They'll feel empowered. They won't feel overwhelmed by money because now all of a sudden they know what money is. Money's just the result. Money's just to create impact. Money's just there to give you an opportunity. We're not working for money. I always tell my kids, I want to work for passion. I want to work for something I love. And if I'm really good at it, guess what? Eventually, money will appear. And that money is used for the household, it's used for impact, and it's just a result.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, I agree with everything said so far. So, but with that, I do have to move us on to the quick question round. We've ran it down as 25 minutes, and so it starts with education. Education is the bedrock of your real estate career. So, give us two recommendations: one for general life wisdom, and then one for real estate.
Whatever you do in life, whether you're learning how to become a better negotiator, a better communicator, a better investor, a better parent, you need to create the foundation. You need to go to the basics. And that may take a little bit of time. And for myself, I mean, that's what I did with real estate. I made so many mistakes because I didn't have the foundation. I didn't have a framework. I didn't have buy right, operate, exit. I was just looking for a deal. And that's why I made all these mistakes. So, whatever you're trying to accomplish, go to the basics. Focus on building the foundation. Go as deep as possible. Build the foundation, and then you can start going up. That's why I never built a foundation in my restaurant. For 20 years, I only had one place, one restaurant, one location. But within 5 years, Jake and I, we built a pretty solid foundation before we started really scaling up. 18 months for the first deal. Within 2 years, we had 200 units, but that was only 3 deals, right? We built the foundation. I think that's what people forget. And it's okay if it takes you a little bit of time. No one is born an expert or naturally gifted at anything. Those who really succeed put the time, the effort, and the reps in. There's the learning zone and there's the performance zone, as Eduardo Brisenis says in his book, The Performance Paradox. He was the person that Carol Dweck wrote about in Mindset. You need to be able to learn stuff, and then at some point you perform it. But if you don't put enough time into learning your craft, the performances aren't going to get any better.
Yeah, I that is one thing. I again looking back, if I could go back to the first Gabe who bought that first deal he flipped, I would say get a mentor.
Uh-huh.
Get with somebody who can teach you exactly what you're doing. I bought courses and stuff, and I kind of learned that way in the general framework. But then everything else is just learn on my own, learn through mistakes, and I could have cut that down a lot if I had just hired a mentor. And for some
Hmm.
reason, I didn't. Well, I know why, because $10,000, $20,000 seemed like way too much money in my mind. But the cost of that cost is nothing compared to all of the shortcuts that it will give you in terms of the mistakes that you don't have to make. Um, so yeah,
Hmm.
like that. Moving on to the next question. This is for your younger self. Let's go back to the Gino who was still working in the pizza kitchen. Go back to him, look him in the eye, give him one piece of advice moving forward.
When I was younger, and that is a great question because I don't know if I'd really want to change anything where I am right now. I did meet my wife at the restaurant when I bought it. But one thing that I would say is surround yourself with like minded individuals into what you're trying to accomplish. I was only hanging around with other pizza guys that had one or two shops. And that was the
Mm.
reality. That was my paradigm. That was my, as Tony Robbins says, that was the state. That was the level that I was at. I never even considered, hey, what does it look like to open up another place? What does it look like to scale and create a business? And Jim Rome says it, the five people that you surround yourself with. And I just looked at those five people back then and they weren't. And maybe it was because I was insecure. Maybe I just felt comfortable where I was, but it came to that point where the uncomfortableness showed up and I'm like, okay, now I need to take action. I wish I would have taken action sooner. That's the one thing that I tell my younger self is I wish I would have taken action sooner.
Yep. And that same sentiment has been echoed across so many of the
Hmm.
600 and something episodes that we've done. Every time somebody says it, I'm going to point it back to you, the listener. If you haven't gotten your first deal
Yes.
done yet, just go out there and get it done. It doesn't matter what it is. Could be a piece of land, could be a single family, a multifamily,
Hmm.
whatever. Just get a deal done and get that ball rolling. Because 10 years down the road, you're going to be thankful that you did it now versus a year, 2 years, 5 years from now.
Hmm.
With that, pushing us on to the next question. This one is about the U.S. It's a big place. There is a lot of opportunity out there. Give me the single metro you're most excited about investing in today.
We like the Southeast, but I mean, for us, we're in Knoxville, Tennessee by default. We're vertically integrated. I think the Midwest has a lot of opportunity. I always loved Omaha, Nebraska. I don't know why. I was attracted to
Omaha.
it at first. It's one of those sleepers. I don't think there's a ton of institutional capital there. I think it's underneath the radar, but it does have population growth. It has a nice affordability. Rents are still pretty low. It's a nice place to live. It's in the center of the country. So if I had to have a sleeper, I would say Omaha, Nebraska.
Interesting. You're actually I don't think that's ever been mentioned. I asked this 600 something episodes, and
Take a
I
look
don't
at
think
it. When
anyone
you
said
get
Omaha.
off,
Yeah.
go on to Berkadia and look at their metrics. I just love it. It's a slow grower. It's a sleeper. It's one of those places where you can cash flow and you can actually get some equity appreciation. The median income of that market is actually very good. I'm very surprised, and the affordability, people can literally afford to live in that market as well, which is something that I like because you can ultimately long term continue to have rent growth.
Huh, yeah, and it's got Berkshire Hathaway. Actually, I don't know if they are, or headquartered there,
I'm not
but,
sure if he is. I drove by his house. Very impressed. Not
yeah.
not not the kind of house you think that Warren would be living in, but hey, to each his own.
Yeah, man. He doesn't really care about the money either. He just
That's
likes the
right.
deal. All right, next question is about lessons learned. Not every deal we get into goes the way we expect it. In fact, pretty much every time something's going to go wrong, and that's when we get to learn a lesson. So, what was a deal that went a little bit sideways for you, and then what was the lesson you pulled from it?
I've had several deals go sideways, but one of the more recent ones back in 2019, it's because we didn't do proper market research. Everything
Mm,
checked out. Unit mixes were great. Uh, it had brick, utilities were separately metered. We just didn't realize the median income was too low, and it was an old vintage. So we kept having a lot of issues with plumbing, outdoor plumbing, and all that. We were fortunate that we bought it right. We bought it in the right part of the market cycle, and we were still able to exit 18 months after we bought it because we just realized, hey, we made a big mistake here. But just be very careful when you're buying, especially a multifamily. Just look at the median income, look at the area, because if you're trying to push rents, you can only push them 3 times of what somebody's paying. And if you're trying to add value to a property and it's in a less marginal area, no matter how much value you add, it's going to drop down to the level of the resident base in that submarket. Now, you can avoid that by paying really cheap, but understanding that that asset is not going to appreciate as much over time. And if you're willing to do that, that's fine. But go in with eyes open and make sure that you're buying an asset and understanding the crime and the median income of the area.
yeah, that was actually my biggest lesson learned too. Was I bought it was a
Ah.
self storage facility in a metro that had really good growth
Mhm.
numbers, but the crime metrics, I didn't realize
Oh.
how much of an impact that would have on the property itself. And
On
you only
self-storage too, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You only learn
Wow.
that lesson once, I'll tell you that
Boy.
much. All right, and that takes us to the other side of the coin, the deals that the highlight reel. Some deals do go right, and things just seem to work out, and those ones stand out in our mind as our favorite. So, pick your favorite deal. What was it? Tell us about it.
February of 2015, I'm with my kids, and we are at an art place, and they're sculpting and they're doing crafts, and I get a phone call from Jake, and there's this $12.6 million deal, 281 units, and I'm like, "Wow, where are we gonna get the money on this thing?" And Jake says, "This guy's willing to do seller financing." He wants to seller finance the whole thing at 20% down payment and 80 by the bank. And at this point, we had built a relationship with the bank. So we're like, okay. It took 7 months to go its course. And the reason why we were able to secure this is because it was a family, the older brother and the younger brother. The younger brother tried to take it over, screwed it up. The older brother had to take it back. So we ultimately ended up buying this deal at $11 million, 20% seller financing, 80% bank loan. We literally walked out of that deal with $100,000 at closing because of the prepaid rents and all. Title company was like, I've never seen this before. We still own the deal. It's probably worth 200, it's probably worth $30 million now. We refinanced it once. We're probably going to refinance it in the next couple of years. It's in a great submarket, great unit mix, great builds. This is a type of asset that I'm sure most operators would have exited, 3 or 4 years after they bought it. But we just saw the intrinsic value in holding an asset in that market where we were able to control rents because it's not a big submarket, but at the same time, the population growth is really good. And then we were able to refinance it after 18 months. We were able to pay off that seller finance note. And then 18 months after that, we were able to go to Fannie and Freddie and put it on Fannie and Freddie debt.
Nice, man. Something I want to kind of highlight in what you just said. You did hybrid financing, and I don't know, maybe I'm dense, but for some reason I this type of structure. It just recently like kind of popped into my view where I'm like, duh, of
Yes.
course you do this. You get a bank loan, and then the seller finances the down payment.
Yes.
Um, I don't know why. It just never occurred to me, but it's genius, and I've been putting that in all my LOIs now. I usually do, seller financing and then just get the seller to finance, 60, 80% of it. And I bring 20%, but you can do it the other way. Just get a bank to loan the vast majority, 70%, 80%, 60, whatever it is. And then have the seller finance the rest. It's a really way to go, a good way to go about it.
Well, the deal itself, when we took it over, was generating $146,000 a month. The first month we took over. After we took over, the first month we took over, it generated 170,000 a month. So we knew there was a ton of value. The bank had confidence in us because they had seen we already had a few hundred assets under ownership. And the bank said, "Well, hey, you know what? If you don't pay the second, the seller's going to take it over. So there's no risk to us." So we created a win-win all around. I mean, that was the idea with this. And I think if you're going to create the structure, you need to know what you're doing. Obviously, you need to tell the bank and create a great relationship, either with a credit union or a community bank. And then from them, you need to be able to convey that to the seller and say, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, this is what we're going to do." And the seller was on board because when he got his 20% down, it was a couple $1,000,000. He didn't know what to do with that money. We sent them over to our community bank, and he's put all that money into the community bank, and that community bank was thrilled. One of their biggest deposits ever. So that's what you're trying to do in real estate, is try to create a win-win, pull yourself out, and see how you can benefit both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, one point on that is, having fully financing a purchase price. It has to be bought at the right number, otherwise it's not
Yes,
cash flow.
yes, yes. I agree.
Yeah. All right, well, with that, that's all the questions. I'm gonna push us into the very last one. This is for the listeners. It is, you've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure people wanna reach out, get in contact with you. This is a two-parter. Where can they find you? And then what can they expect when they reach out?
Just go to barbaro360.com, BARBARO 360.com. We've started a company for the family. And, my ultimate goal and the vision with this company is families with financial intelligence can change the world for the better. And that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on families through our money coaching, through our business behavioral archetype coaching, through our workshops that we're going to be putting together for families, because we want families to have these conversations, because the families are the bedrock of this country. And if we can heal families and we can create families and have families stay together, they can start breaking those patterns that we've seen generational from one to the next. And if you can start, focusing on that, then all of a sudden families start changing. And you're not only changing the family, but you're changing people around those families.
Awesome. I will put that link in the show notes. So if you guys
Thanks,
want to
brother.
reach out to Gino, all you got to do is click the little more in the description. It'll pull down that full description, and in there you can find his link. All right, man. As always, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for hopping on the show.
Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. For everybody who's with us today, thank you guys for showing up. You are the reason we do this. So if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, Gabe at the realestateinvestingclub.com. If you guys want to support the show, just leave us a review. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. Keep rocking real estate, and I look forward to seeing you